She was just wearing a plain gray tracksuit and carried an old backpack. But the moment she stepped into first class, all eyes turned cold. A flight attendant asked her to step aside because surely someone like her didn't belong there. What no one knew was that this ordinary woman was the wife of the man who owned the entire airline. And within hours, those who had silently judged her were about to face a corporate earthquake they never saw coming. A name, a valid ticket, and a wake-up call that would shake the very foundation of luxury service. Think you've seen bias before? Wait until you read this story. She walked onto the first-class cabin wearing a dark gray sweatshirt and sweatpants, but they humiliated her and forced her to leave. They had no idea her billionaire husband owned the entire airline, and what happened next left everyone speechless. The morning sun streamed through the expansive windows of Denver International Airport as Eliza Morgan made her way through the bustling terminal. At 34, she moved with quiet confidence, her blonde hair tucked under a black cap, her athletic frame dressed in a comfortable dark gray sweatshirt and light gray sweatpants. A simple silver bracelet on her wrist was her only accessory. To the casual observer, she looked like any other traveler, prioritizing comfort over style for a long flight. No one would guess that she was married to Nathaniel Morgan, the billionaire tech innovator who had recently acquired Summit Airlines as part of his growing transportation empire. Eliza checked her watch, a modest timepiece that had belonged to her grandmother. She had plenty of time before boarding began for Flight 981 to Boston, where her parents were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Nathaniel had offered their private jet, but Eliza preferred flying commercial occasionally. It kept her connected to the real world in ways that wealth often insulated people from. "Just a regular black coffee, please," she told the barista at the terminal cafe, fishing cash from her pocket rather than using the platinum card tucked away in her phone case. The young man behind the counter smiled. "Heading somewhere nice?" "Boston. Family celebration," Eliza replied, dropping her change in the tip jar. "Well, have a great flight." Coffee in hand, Eliza made her way to gate A21. Her eyes lingered on the families sitting together, elderly couples holding hands, business travelers typing furiously on laptops. This diverse tapestry of humanity fascinated her. Perhaps because she'd grown up in a modest household in rural Colorado before meeting Nathaniel at a tech conference where she'd been presenting her environmental research. "Now boarding our first-class passengers for Summit Airlines Flight 981 to Boston," announced the gate agent. Eliza gathered her simple carry-on, a well-worn backpack rather than designer luggage, and joined the short line forming at the priority boarding lane. A businessman in an expensive suit glanced at her casual attire, then did a subtle double-take. Eliza was used to these looks. They no longer bothered her. "Boarding pass, please," said the gate agent, a practiced smile on her face. Eliza handed over her phone displaying the digital boarding pass. The agent scanned it, and her smile faltered just slightly as she looked between the first-class designation and Eliza's casual appearance. "Thank you, Miss Morgan. Enjoy your flight." Eliza nodded and walked down the jet bridge, unaware that her decision to dress comfortably today would soon create a storm that would change Summit Airlines forever. The first-class cabin of Summit Airlines Flight 981 gleamed with luxury. Wide leather seats in deep navy blue, polished wood accents, an attentive flight attendant serving pre-departure champagne. As Eliza stepped aboard, flight attendant Diane Phillips looked up, her practiced smile freezing slightly at the sight of the casually dressed woman. "Good morning," Eliza said warmly, glancing at her boarding pass. "Seat 2A by the window." Diane's perfectly penciled eyebrows arched slightly. "First class is to your left," she said, her tone carrying a hint of doubt. "Yes, I know, thank you." Eliza moved confidently toward her assigned seat, aware of Diane's eyes following her. The first-class cabin was half full with passengers who fit the expected mold. Men in business suits, a woman in an elegant dress, a celebrity chef Eliza recognized from television. She stowed her backpack in the overhead compartment and settled into her seat, pulling out a dog-eared paperback rather than the latest electronic device. "Excuse me." A male flight attendant named Richard appeared at her side, his voice low but firm. "May I see your boarding pass?" Eliza looked up, meeting his skeptical gaze. "Of course." She pulled up the digital pass on her phone again. Richard scrutinized it longer than necessary, glancing between the screen and Eliza's casual attire. "One moment, please." She watched as he conferred with Diane and a man at the front of the cabin. both stealing glances in her direction. The businessman across the aisle pretended not to notice, but his attention was obvious. Eliza took a deep breath, recognizing the familiar signs of judgment forming. Diane approached again, now accompanied by the lead flight attendant, Carolyn, whose name badge indicated her supervisory status. "Ma'am," Caroline began, her voice professionally modulated but cool, "there seems to be some confusion with your boarding pass." Eliza set her book down. "There's no confusion. I'm in 2A, first class." Caroline's smile tightened. "Our system occasionally makes errors. This is a first-class cabin and you don't think I belong here?" Eliza finished, her voice calm but direct. "Is that what you're suggesting?" A flicker of discomfort crossed Caroline's face. "Not at all. We simply need to verify." "You've already verified my boarding pass twice," Eliza pointed out. "It clearly shows I'm assigned to this seat." By now, the other first-class passengers were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Richard stood nearby, arms crossed, his expression suggesting he'd encountered this situation before, and thought he knew how it would end. "Perhaps you were upgraded accidentally," Diane suggested, her tone making it clear how unlikely she considered this possibility. "Perhaps I purchased a first-class ticket," Eliza countered. "Is there a dress code for this cabin that I'm unaware of?" Caroline's professional veneer slipped just slightly. "No official dress code, but our first-class passengers typically present themselves in a manner that reflects the premium experience." "I see," Eliza's voice remained steady. "So it's not about the ticket I purchased, but rather how I look." A distinguished older gentleman across the aisle cleared his throat. "I've flown in sweatpants in first class many times. No one's ever questioned my right to be here." Caroline flushed. "Sir, this is between our staff and the passenger." "It shouldn't be happening at all," he replied, then returned to his newspaper. Diane leaned closer to Caroline, whispering something. Caroline nodded and turned back to Eliza. "Ma'am, we have a full flight today and we need to ensure all passengers are in their correct assigned seats. Our system shows this seat should be occupied by an E. Morgan." "That's correct," Eliza said. "Eliza Morgan. Do you have identification to verify that?" Richard asked, his tone suggesting he'd just caught her in a lie. Eliza maintained her composure, though her patience was wearing thin. "You've never asked any other passenger to prove their identity after boarding. The gate agent already verified my boarding pass." "It's standard procedure when there are discrepancies," Caroline insisted. "What discrepancies, besides the fact that I'm not dressed the way you think I should be?" The tension in the cabin was palpable. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A woman whispered to her companion, loud enough for Eliza to hear, "If she bought the ticket, what's the problem?" Caroline's expression hardened. "Ma'am, if you cannot verify your identity, we'll need to reassign you to an economy seat." Eliza sat straighter. "I can verify my identity, but I shouldn't have to. No one else in this cabin has been asked to do so." "Miss Morgan, if that's who you are," Richard said with barely concealed condescension, "we're simply following protocol." "No," Eliza replied firmly. "You're following your biases. If I were wearing pearls in a designer outfit, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Caroline's professional smile vanished entirely. "This is becoming disruptive. Either show identification, or we'll need to move you to economy class." Eliza noticed the other passengers watching, some with sympathy, others with detached amusement, the daily theater of air travel unfolding before them. She could end this instantly by revealing who her husband was. But that wasn't how Eliza navigated the world. She had never used Nathaniel's name to gain advantages or special treatment. "This is discrimination," Eliza stated clearly. "I purchased this ticket like everyone else." "Ma'am," Caroline's voice turned frosty, "we need to complete boarding. Your options are to verify your identity, move to economy, or deplane." The injustice of the situation burned, but Eliza recognized the impossible position she was in. Making a scene would only delay the flight for everyone. "Fine," she said finally. "I'll move, but I want your names and employee numbers. This isn't over." Richard smirked slightly. "We'll find you a seat in economy and provide compensation for the fare difference." "I don't want compensation," Eliza replied, gathering her backpack. "I want accountability." As she stood, she noticed the sympathetic glances from a few passengers, while others studiously avoided eye contact. The older gentleman who had spoken up earlier shook his head in disgust. With an escort that felt more like an expulsion, Diane led Eliza through the premium cabin toward economy. Passengers in business class watched curiously as she passed, hushed whispers following in her wake. Eliza held her head high, refusing to show how deeply the humiliation cut. "Here you are," Diane said, gesturing to a middle seat in economy. "We apologize for any inconvenience." Eliza looked her directly in the eyes. "No, you don't, but you might soon enough." If this story has captured your attention, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that reveal the unexpected twists of life and justice. Now let's return to see what happens next with Eliza. The following morning, the morning dawned bright over the Summit Airlines corporate headquarters in Denver. The glass and steel building reflected the mountain landscape, an architectural statement of the company's premium position in the airline industry. In the executive suite, Chief Customer Officer Patricia Winters reviewed the day's agenda with growing anxiety. The quarterly customer experience review was scheduled for 10 a.m., and the numbers weren't promising. Passenger complaints had increased by 11% over the previous quarter, with issues regarding staff attitude topping the list. "The board members will be attending," her assistant reminded her, "and Mr. Morgan has confirmed he'll be joining in person rather than virtually." Patricia's stomach tightened. Nathaniel Morgan had acquired Summit Airlines 9 months ago, but today would mark his first appearance at a quarterly review. His reputation for demanding excellence was legendary, as was his limited tolerance for excuses. "Make sure Caroline Reynolds and her first-class cabin crew are here," Patricia instructed. "They've maintained the highest customer satisfaction scores, and we need some positive examples to highlight." Meanwhile, across town, Nathaniel Morgan adjusted his tie in the mirror of their spacious penthouse. At 38, Nathaniel Morgan carried himself with the natural authority of someone accustomed to success. His tailored navy suit and crisp white shirt projected power, without ostentation. "Are you sure you don't want me to say something directly to the flight attendants?" he asked, watching Eliza's reflection as she sat on the edge of their bed. Eliza shook her head. "This isn't about personal revenge, Nate. It's about changing a culture." "They humiliated my wife," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "That's pretty personal to me." Eliza stood and straightened his tie, though it needed no adjustment. "And I love you for that. But this is bigger than me, or those 3 crew members. This is about a system that judges people based on appearances rather than character." Nathaniel's expression softened as he looked at his wife. Eliza had maintained her groundedness despite the wealth that surrounded her now. It was one of the countless reasons he'd fallen in love with her. She saw the world without the distortion of privilege. "All right," he agreed, "we'll do it your way." He checked his watch. "The meeting starts in an hour. You're sure about the timing?" "Absolutely sure," Eliza nodded, "and I'll be wearing exactly what I wore yesterday." At Summit Airlines headquarters, the executive conference room filled with board members, department heads, and key staff. Carolyn Reynolds, along with Richard and Diane from the first-class cabin crew, sat together near the back. They had been surprised by the invitation to attend such a high-level meeting, but assumed it was related to their consistently high-performance metrics. "Maybe they're finally creating that elite service team they've been discussing," Richard whispered to Diane. "We'd be the obvious choice to lead it." Diane nodded, smoothing her perfectly pressed uniform. "I heard the new owner is actually attending. This could be a big opportunity." Caroline shushed them as Patricia Winters called the meeting to order. "Thank you all for being here today," Patricia began. "As you know, customer experience is the cornerstone of our brand promise at Summit Airlines. Today we'll be reviewing our quarterly performance metrics and discussing strategies for improvement." The room quieted as the door opened and Nathaniel Morgan entered. Tall and commanding, carrying himself with the quiet confidence that came from building a tech empire from the ground up. "Mr. Morgan," Patricia said, "we're honored to have you join us today." Nathaniel nodded and took a seat at the head of the table. "Please continue." The presentation began with slides, charts, and polite framing of problems. Nathaniel listened without expression, making notes in a small, leather-bound notebook. "Now I'd like to call attention to our bright spots," Patricia said, her voice gaining enthusiasm. "Our first-class service on transcontinental routes has maintained a 92% satisfaction rating, well above industry average. We have members of that team here today." She gestured toward Caroline, Richard, and Diane. Nathaniel looked at them for the first time, his gaze revealing nothing. "In fact," Patricia continued, "I've asked Caroline Reynolds, our senior first-class cabin manager, to share some insights about their approach to premium customer service." Caroline stood confidently and moved to the front. "Thank you, Patricia. At Summit Airlines, we believe the first-class experience begins the moment our passengers step on board. We're trained to recognize and accommodate the needs of our premium travelers who expect and deserve a certain level of service. The door to the conference room opened quietly. We carefully attend to every detail, Caroline continued, from the way we address our passengers to ensuring that the first-class cabin maintains its exclusive atmosphere. Her words faltered. Nathaniel Morgan's attention had shifted. Caroline turned. There, standing just inside the doorway, was the woman in the dark gray sweatshirt, light gray sweatpants, and black cap from yesterday's flight. For a moment, Caroline didn't process what she was seeing. Then recognition dawned, followed swiftly by confusion. Richard and Diane exchanged alarmed glances as they too recognized yesterday's misplaced passenger. Nathaniel Morgan stood. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "I believe some of you have already met my wife, Eliza Morgan." The conference room froze in a tableau of shock and dawning horror. Carolyn stood at the presentation podium, her professional composure cracking like thin ice. Richard and Diane seemed to physically shrink in their seats, their faces draining of color. Around the table, executives and board members looked between Nathaniel, Eliza, and the flight attendants, trying to piece together the unfolding drama. "Your wife?" Patricia Winters finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Nathaniel confirmed, his tone deceptively casual. "Eliza flew from Denver to Boston yesterday on our airline in first class." Each phrase fell like a hammer. Eliza moved to stand beside her husband, still dressed in the exact outfit that had deemed her unworthy of the seat she'd paid for. The silver bracelet on her wrist caught the light, the only hint of luxury on her person. "Perhaps," Nathaniel suggested, Caroline was about to explain Summit Airlines' approach to recognizing premium travelers. "Please continue." Caroline's mouth opened and closed. No words emerged. Her carefully constructed presentation about first-class service excellence now lay in ruins at her feet. Diane stared fixedly at the table while Richard's earlier smirk had transformed into an expression of pure dread. There must have been a misunderstanding," Caroline finally stammered. "A misunderstanding?" Nathaniel repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting choice of words. Eliza, would you characterize yesterday's incident as a misunderstanding?" Eliza stepped forward. Unlike her husband, whose controlled anger simmered beneath a professional exterior, she projected calm purpose. "What happened yesterday wasn't a misunderstanding," she said, her voice clear enough to reach every corner of the silent room. "It was bias in action. I was judged, not by my boarding pass, which was checked multiple times, but by my appearance." She looked directly at Caroline, Richard, and Diane. "You decided I didn't belong in the first class because I didn't match your image of who deserves to be there. You questioned my identity, something you did for no other passenger. You threatened me with removal from the flight, and ultimately you humiliated me by marching me back to economy class in front of a full plane of onlookers." A board member cleared his throat uncomfortably. Mr. Morgan, perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No," Nathaniel interrupted firmly. "This is precisely what this customer experience meeting should address. But let's be clear, I'm not here as an angry husband, though I certainly am one so." His gaze swept the room. "I'm here as the owner of this airline, deeply concerned about a culture that judges people based on appearances rather than treating all customers with equal respect." Patricia Winters looked stricken. "Mr. Morgan, I assure you this incident doesn't reflect our company policies." "Doesn't it?" Eliza interjected gently. "Because when I spoke with other flight attendants and airport staff after the incident, I heard numerous similar stories. A teenager in a hoodie with a business class ticket, questioned repeatedly. A disabled passenger, assumed to be in the wrong line for priority boarding. An elderly woman in casual clothes redirected from the first-class lounge despite valid access." She placed a folder on the conference table. 27 documented incidents in the past 3 months alone, all following the same pattern. "This isn't about 3 flight attendants, it's about a culture." The revelation hit the room like a physical force. Patricia reached for the folder with trembling hands. I had no idea," she whispered. "That's the problem," Nathaniel stated. "You should have known. These incidents were reported, but they were classified as customer misunderstandings and buried in your feedback system." Caroline had finally recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan," she began, her voice professionally contrite. "On behalf of our team, I offer my deepest apologies for yesterday's incident. There are protocols we're expected to follow regarding verification. Stop, Eliza said quietly but firmly. You're still not understanding. When the businessman in 2C wore sweatpants in first class last month, did you ask for his ID? When the famous actress in 1A boarded in sunglasses and a baseball cap, did you question her right to be there? The protocol isn't the problem. The selective application of it is. Richard, perhaps sensing his career circling the drain, attempted to interject. Mrs. Morgan, there was no way for us to know who you were. That's exactly the point, Eliza replied. You shouldn't need to know who I am to treat me with basic dignity. My worth as a passenger isn't determined by my marriage, my bank account, or my clothes. I purchased a ticket like everyone else. A heavy silence fell over the room as the truth of her words sank in. Nathaniel looked at the three flight attendants. Your actions yesterday reflected poor judgment and explicit bias. In many companies, that would be cause for immediate termination. Caroline, Richard, and Diane seemed to brace for the inevitable. However, he continued, firing you would solve nothing at a systemic level. It would just make us feel better temporarily while allowing the underlying culture to remain unchanged. He turned to address the entire room. Starting next week, Summit Airlines will implement a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all customer-facing staff. We're revising our customer feedback system to specifically track and address incidents involving perceived discrimination or prejudice. Eliza stepped forward and the three of you, she said to the flight attendants, will be temporarily reassigned. 1 month working alongside our customer advocacy team, directly handling passenger complaints. Another month in economy class service. After that, if your performance reviews indicate a genuine understanding of these issues, you can reapply for your first-class positions. Patricia Winters found her voice. I'll personally oversee these changes, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, and I believe we should compensate the other passengers you identified in your report. Nathaniel nodded in agreement, then addressed the flight attendants directly. This isn't about punishment. It's about understanding. The true measure of premium service isn't how well you treat people who look important. It's how you treat everyone, regardless of appearance. As the reality of the situation fully dawned on everyone present, Board Chair Ella Simmons spoke up for the first time. I believe we owe Mrs. Morgan our gratitude, she said firmly. She's identified a significant blind spot in our operation, one that could have continued damaging our reputation and alienating customers. This is an opportunity for meaningful change. Caroline, Richard, and Diane sat in stunned silence, their earlier confidence shattered by the realization of their actions and the unexpected consequence. Not immediate firing, but something perhaps more challenging. The opportunity to learn and change. 3 months later, Eliza Morgan settled into Seat 2A on Summit Airlines Flight 923 from Denver to San Francisco, dressed in the same dark gray sweatshirt, light gray sweatpants, and black cap. She opened her book and prepared for the 5-hour journey to a climate research conference. Good morning, Mrs. Morgan, said a familiar voice. Can I offer you a beverage before takeoff? Eliza looked up to see Richard standing beside her seat, professional and attentive, his eyes holding none of the condescension from their previous encounter. Instead, there was something that looked remarkably like respect. Just water for now, thank you, she replied. As Richard placed the water on her armrest, he hesitated. Mrs. Morgan, I'm not sure if you remember me. I remember you, Richard. He nodded, acknowledging the impossibility of being forgotten. I wanted to thank you, he said quietly. These past 3 months have been educational. Eliza regarded him thoughtfully. How was your time in customer advocacy? Humbling, he admitted. I had no idea how many passengers felt dismissed or judged by our actions. Things I never even thought about. Little comments or assumptions. They noticed everything. People usually do, Eliza replied. Down the aisle, she spotted Diane assisting an elderly man in casual clothes, her manner patient and attentive as she helped him stow his worn duffel bag in the overhead compartment. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. The training program you and Mr. Morgan implemented has changed things, Richard continued. Not just procedures, but how we think about our passengers, about people in general. I'm glad to hear that. Richard straightened, returning to his professional demeanor. Enjoy your flight, Mrs. Morgan. If you need anything at all, I'm here to assist. As he moved to serve other passengers, Eliza noticed Caroline in the galley, efficiently preparing for takeoff. Their eyes met briefly, and Carolyn gave a small, respectful nod. Not the exaggerated deference of someone afraid for their job, but a genuine acknowledgement between people who had moved past conflict to understanding. The changes at Summit Airlines extended far beyond these three flight attendants. The anti-bias training program had been implemented company-wide, from check-in counters to executive offices. Customer satisfaction scores were climbing. Employee morale had improved as staff felt empowered to treat all passengers with equal respect. More significantly, other airlines had taken notice. Summit's new approach to inclusive customer service was becoming a model in the industry, challenging long-held assumptions about what premium service should look and feel like. As the flight reached cruising altitude, Eliza gazed out the window at the patchwork landscape below. She thought about how a single moment of injustice had catalyzed meaningful change, not through vengeance or public shaming, but through the harder, more lasting path of education and accountability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. "How's the flight?" She smiled and typed back, "Different, better." 2 rows ahead, a young woman in ripped jeans and a vintage t-shirt laughed with her companion in the first-class cabin, receiving the same attentive service as the business executives around them. No second glances, no veiled comments, no subtle indicators that they somehow didn't belong. This, Eliza realized, was the true victory. Not the vindication of her own experience, but the small, everyday dignities now extended to others who might have previously been judged and found wanting. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Caroline approached with the beverage cart, her manner professional and warm as she served each passenger with equal consideration. When she reached Eliza, there was a moment of genuine connection. "Mrs. Morgan," Caroline said quietly, "I want you to know that what you and Mr. Morgan did, it was fair, more than fair, and it made us better at our jobs." Eliza nodded. "That was the point, not punishment, but progress." "I've learned to see people differently," Caroline admitted, "to question my assumptions. It's changed how I interact with everyone, not just passengers." As Caroline moved on, Eliza reflected on how change happens, rarely through dramatic gestures or grand statements, but through individual moments of recognition, through systems that reinforce better choices, and through leaders willing to address not just symptoms, but causes. The plane banked gently westward towards San Francisco, carrying its diverse complement of humanity across the sky, each passenger different, each equally deserving of respect, regardless of appearance, status, or circumstance. A simple truth, yet one so often forgotten in a world quick to judge based on superficial cues. For Eliza Morgan, dressed in her comfortable sweatshirt and cap, the victory wasn't that she could now fly first class without question. The victory was that, increasingly, so could everyone else. Final reflection. Stories like Eliza's remind us that true change comes not from punishment, but from understanding and accountability. Has someone ever judged you by your appearance? Or have you caught yourself making snap judgments about others? Share your experience in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that reflect the complexity of human dignity. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories. And join our community of viewers who believe in the power of understanding to create a more respectful world.